and welcome to your award-winning The Reasons I'm Broke podcast, bringing you the reasons we're broke, ranging from comics, movies, TV, video games, and more. I'm Daniel, and this week we have a special comic book interview. So this project is by project creator Jerry Carita. He's a career unscripted TV producer and director who has ventured into comics, and he's collaborating now with artists like Mary Landro, Takeshi Okazaki, and Walt Flanagan to bring this unique Cicada Samurai story to life. So Jerry, welcome on.
Thank you so much, man. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So I saw this where Kelly and I, she was the original host of this podcast about 11 years ago now, and we've had some longer connections to the team over at Blue Juice Comics and Tom Mum specifically, and to the point where she made it onto Comic Book Man, and she didn't know that he was going to be there, and he didn't know that we were going to be there, so it became this whole thing.
Oh, wow.
So when we saw that Blue Juice was emailing about Cicada Samurai, I had to check it out. First off, the banner, immediately artwork, that's how you do it, right? You sell I used to manage a comic shop, and you sell the artwork first, and then hopefully the readers come back for more, and that's what got me on this one. Saw the banner, that Blue Juice was pushing it. So what can you tell us about Cicada Samurai and why we're doing this comic and what the story's about?
It's funny, the whole thing with Blue Juice, and what you just said about covers, you know that expression, you can't judge a book by its cover. I always say that, but with comics, it seems like you can't judge the book by its cover. You can decide whether you're going to pick it up and look at it by the art on the cover. And I learned that with Blue Juice. So Blue Juice and I go way back. I was on Comic Book Men, the first season of that show, when they created the company, when they started Blue Juice Comics. Those are all buddies of mine. I was actually playing poker with two of them last night, with Ronnie Porto, who's the writer of The Accelerators, and Tom Mum, who's one of the four guys that owns the company. All very good buddies of mine. And they're helping me a lot with everything I've been doing comics related. I've been actually taking their stuff to Comic-Cons for the last 2 years and kind of learning the business by working with them. So very appreciative of those guys. Cicada Samurai is, it's about a cicada, the little insect. He's about this big, only he's imbued with he's immortal, and he's imbued with magical samurai fighting powers. And it's so that he can be the only cicada able to protect the millions of cicadas that emerge out of the ground. So if you're in America and you live in the Northeast anywhere, you know about these little monsters that every 17 years come out of the ground in groups of like millions, and they just make an unholy racket for about 3 weeks. They're above ground just long enough to mate and drop dead. There was a big brood that emerged, I think 2 summers ago. And I just became obsessed with them. I started reading about them. Europeans, when they first got here, they had never seen cicadas before. There are none in Europe. And they thought they were locusts. They thought they were like a biblical plague. These are people who came here because they weren't allowed to burn witches at home. So they were really superstitious. These things come out of the ground. They're huge flies, and they're green with big red eyes. And the Europeans thought that their eyes were red because they've been staring into the fires of hell for 17 years in the ground. It really goofy stuff. So I started to think about the insects as being like characters. And then the story of it is I have 3 kids. They're getting older. The oldest is 12, and he likes to spend less and less time in places where I can keep him safe. So, that's a big anxiety thing for me. It's just the kids getting older and, being out in the world without me watching them, without my wife watching them, And so I thought, like, okay, what's a way I could tell a story about that? And I thought about these cicadas. Cicadas are 17 years old. They've never been above ground. It's dangerous, like thousands of birds, and a thing called a cicada killing hornet, which is a real monster of a thing. So I thought, what if one of them was the only adult, and his job is to try and keep millions of these little kids safe? It's a losing battle. He's not going to keep them all safe. There are too many of them, and they're teenagers. So they're going to go off and do stupid things that they shouldn't do and get themselves in trouble. But that's what the story's about. For me, it's sort of he's a parent in kind of a hopeless situation, but he has these fighting abilities, and he's the only cicada who knows how to fight and protect himself and protect the others. So that's his job.
Yeah, I like knowing the background of how you put this together, because I'm a parent of a 5-year-old, and we have a 5-month-old now, and it's just the experience of being first-time parents in many ways. And when he gets to that age of 12, I already have so many fears and anxieties as it is at 5 years old. So for you to bring that you're going through now and putting that into the comic, I mean, I think that's going to resonate through the story as the character progresses. I really like that.
Thank you. I hope so. My youngest is 7, and he's the most like borderline suicidal of the group. He's constantly trying to kill himself, and your job as a parent is just like, keep them alive. Especially when you're 5-month-old, your whole job is there's nothing else to do there.
Yep.
They just lay around, and eventually they learn to roll over, and then they try to, as soon as they start to roll, they just roll off of things and try to kill themselves. And your whole job is just try to keep them alive until they can take care of themselves. And the moment they can do that, that's also terrifying, because now they're trying to take care of themselves, and that you've been the one taking care of them for, however long it's been. So yeah, I hope that's what resonates. That's what it's about for me. I think other people will read it. It's action, it's gore, it's horror. Like I said, a lot of these cicadas are not going to make it. A lot of these kids are going to die very gruesome, bloody deaths. I actually, right after we're done with this interview, I'm going to update my page, the campaign, because I have some interior pages to share now. For the first nice. I wrote it, and then Mary drew it, and then I didn't realize that I had written it so gory, but I did, and then she just nailed it, and it's great. It's so I'm so excited for people to. I'm kind of giddy about it.
Yeah, I look forward to seeing the interiors and some of the previews. What can you tell us about some of the other creators on this project and some of the variant covers that are on the Kickstarter?
So Mary's a young artist, and she's in Edmonton, Canada. She did her own Kickstarter a few months back for something called Rich the Comic. She's actually still finishing it. I think she's a bit of a perfectionist. So she's going one page at a time, being very meticulous, but she did very well with her campaign. And I'm really excited to read that book when it's done. She's wonderful, and she just loves drawing monsters. And so I just reached out to her on Instagram, and she was available and interested. And I was like, almost everything in this story is a monster. I think you're going to have fun writing it, drawing it. And she has been great so far. So that's Mary. She's doing my interior pages, and she did 2 of my covers. Mary Landreau, and you can find her online. She's the only Mary Landreau doing comic book art on Instagram. The second one is Takashi Okazaki, who's the creator of Afro Samurai, the Japanese manga story that became an anime here. He more recently he did Star Wars Visions of the Samurai Duel story. That was a cartoon, I think, that was on the Disney this Star Wars Visions anime series, and then he did more recently a sequel to that in comic book form for Marvel. It's like a Jedi samurai story. It's beautiful. He's great. He does a ton of character design and animation. And again, he did Afro Samurai, which is like just a beautiful, great book. And I reached out to him on Instagram, and he responded, and I almost, like, he responded with a couple of days. I almost passed out. And he was just like, yeah, man, cicadas are apparently, I didn't know this, they're a big deal in Japan, in Japanese culture. There's a lot of like old time characters and shows that all look like insects, that are based on insects, and cicadas are a really big one there. So he was into it, and we were bouncing ideas back and forth about the story. So it was great. And then he is incredibly busy with, lots of animation projects and things like that. So it takes a little while for him to get back to me, but over the course of months, he did the first pass at designing my main character, my main villain, and then this other kind of monster thing that's going to come up later in the story. And he didn't have time to do the inside of the story with the inside pages, which is why I reached out to Mary. And I've been very lucky there too. And then the last one is Walt Flanagan. Walt is, I met him on the set of Comic Book Men. He's one of the guys who, worked in the shop on Comic Book Men back then. He's a star of the Tell 'em Steve Dave podcast, along with Brian Quinn and Ryan Johnson. He kind of runs that whole Tell 'em Steve Dave podcast empire, the media side of it, at least. He creates all the game shows and all the podcasts that they do. And he's an artist. And he used to do, when Kevin Smith was writing Batman, Cacophony and Widening Gyre, Walt was the artist, and he did a few other books. He did one with Blue Juice, 2 with Blue Juice actually, War of the Undead more recently, and Knights of the Fifth Dimension, which is a book he co-created that he wrote with Casey Van Heel. And he's just wonderful, and he has this like love of older comics, like Jack Kirby style comics, but also really violent stuff, like gritty, he has a very gritty kind of aesthetic. And so I just liked that everyone has a different take on it, on the character. So I asked Walt to do a cover and he was like, I would love to. And he did. And it's, it's like the angry, gritty, grizzled, older looking samurai warrior. And he's on like a blood soaked, field where he's just disemboweled a dozen of his enemies. It's so Walt, he likes all the old classic, Wolfman and things like that. So the characters are all kind of like, imagine, like I was trying to explain to him, there's like a bird man, there's a bird monster thing. And so he interpreted it like old movies, like old, Universal monsters. And then has, the samurai like cutting off their limbs and stuff. It's great. So all of them are different, but those are the artists I'm working. Yeah.
And those are going to translate, as you said, over to some covers for the comic. And the project has already gained significant support. I saw that it was one of the picks by Kickstarter. And I don't know if that was more recent, but when I went on more recently, I was like, oh, that's great. It got the banner on there too. Yeah. And so there's various rewards there. So there's digital. You can get this book digitally. You can get it how I like to read comics, physically. Mm-hmm. And there's also different cover art with these different artists, but there's even an aluminum laser print that I saw on there.
Yeah, so Mary is very entrepreneurial, and she has, every time she does something, she starts a company with it. I've noticed that online. So one of the things that she does is she has a company that prints, you can get anything from like a 4x6 up to, I think it's 24x16 is the largest one we're doing. And you can get any of the 4 covers that you like laser printed onto it's like a 1/10 of an inch thick sheet of aluminum, and it'll ship directly to you straight from, the manufacturer in Canada.
Perfect. Yeah. And some of those rewards, and it looks like the campaign has already reached its goal. That means it is going to happen. This campaign is going through. What kind of stretch goals are we looking at if we're going to add some onto Cicada Samurai?
So I'm actually, I was sitting there making a list of stretch goals and like, if I hit this number, I'll do this. If I hit this number and do that. And I started to think like, I just want to do all of the things. So I hit my funding goal in under, I think it was just over 3 days. So
congratulations. Yeah.
Thank you. 80 hours. And then the next morning, that was a Sunday night at like 11 PM. I hit my number. And then the next morning I woke up to the email from Kickstarter that I was going to be a project we love. And so it's been doing, like you said, it's been doing very well. So I'm just putting all the stuff into it. I'm not going to make it like, please give me more money so I can give you more stuff. Like, I'm just going to do it all. So the story was originally an 8-page story. It's now a 10-page story. It was going to be published as an 8-page book, very short, sort of almost an ash can kind of a thing. I'm going to publish it now as 24 pages. I'm going to do the 10-page story. I'm going to do 4 to 6 pages of pinup art. I just today posted online. I'm looking for any up and coming artists who have not been published, ideally, who have, trying to get their name in print. And I'm basically going to run a competition on Instagram. So anyone who wants to do their own version of my character, I'll pick my 4 to 6 favorite ones. There's money. I'll pay for pay for your work, and it'll go in the book. And then you'll get the money. The payment is $50, and then each one of the artists will get 5 free copies of the book. They can give out to friends, sign, whatever they want to do with them. And then I'm also going to do sort of a making of thing for the remaining, 8 or so pages. So you'll see some script pages. You'll see some of Mary's original layouts and sketches and inks and colors and the whole process all the way through. So I'm just putting it all in, and everyone's getting it, because I didn't want to not give any, I didn't want to not share something, so I just was like, let's just do it all.
Well, we've got a couple of artists in the Brocat Core, and just in case, I will have links in the description of today's episode, but in case they're driving, they're traveling, they're at the office, where can they reach out in case they want to be a part of this round of artists to try to get in?
Yeah, so my online stuff for comic books is Thorny Comics, like a rose has a thorn. Thorny Comics. I'm at Thorny Comics on Instagram, on Twitter. You can find, I think I'm the only Thorny Comics page on Facebook. So you can just find me at Thorny Comics, and you'll see there's a post I did today. It's Monday, September 25th. So I did a post today that just lays out sort of the guidelines. So just your own rendition of the character in action, hanging out, doing whatever, taking a nap, laying down after a battle, whatever it is that you want to do that would be cool and fun. But draw the Cicada Samurai. and I'll pick my favorite 4 to 6 and put them in the book.
I saw on the description here that we're sort of calling it like an issue 0. And I get we're taking this one day at a time. Let's get this issue out first, and then we'll think about the future. But was this written out with the plan of, if this is successful, if people want more, here's how we can move forward with more issues? Let's say an issue 1 proper.
That's exactly what it is. I've never written my own thing before. This is my first creator-owned thing. If it was really not good or not, received well by people, I didn't want to, try to sell a bigger version of it first. So I thought, let me do this story that kind of, dip our toe in the water, see if people respond to it, people like it. And then from there, I have a 6 issue first arc planned out and outlined. I'm going to, for the purposes of Kickstarter, I'm going to combine them into groups of 2. So the next thing I do with this, if I come back to Kickstarter with it, will be a double issue. So it won't be a 10-page thing. It'll be probably more like 44 to 48 pages. And that'll be sort of a much larger, double issue. And I'll do 3 of those. And that'll be the equivalent of 6, floppies.
And I've got to ask, as again, I used to manage a comic shop, will there be ways in the future for comic shops, or is there now a way for comic shops to contact you or through the Kickstarter to try to get a rate to get some copies of this issue for their stands?
So I actually didn't make a retailer tier for this one because it was such a short thing. I really didn't think a couple of shops, maybe this was an error on my part. A few shops reached out and asked about a retailer tier. So, maybe I was wrong, but my thought was it's a short, it's expensive for me to print. It didn't seem like a thing that a shop, who am I? Like, so I didn't think that it would be a thing that shops would be interested in carrying off the bat. But for the longer, when I make the larger books, there will absolutely be retailer tiers, and this will be available. I'll make this available. I might actually just reprint this inside the next book, the larger thing. So this way it is part of the story.
All right.
So right now, no, but in the future, absolutely. And long term, my goal is to go through distribution and put it into comic book stores as a traditional comic book. That's the goal.
Yeah, that's exciting. That's always good to partner up with a lot of local shops. You mentioned off the air the conventions. I'm hoping that this is successful enough to where you have a couple of extra copies to take to conventions and hand sell to some people out there, because I'm sure they'll hear about it outside of this campaign as well, seeing how well it is doing.
Yeah, that's my goal too. I think when I do print it and put it in stores, like we talked about Blue Juice Comics, they're still very much part of my whole process. Every time I do a step in this, I talk to somebody at Blue Juice, one of my buddies there, to get guidance. And so at the point where I'm ready to go through Diamond or whatever the process is at that point to get it into comic book stores, that's exactly what I'll do. Is I'll work with them. I'll get it in front of people. And the industry is weird, and I want to, anything that I can do to help support any comic book shop that's trying to support indie comics is something I'll do. Yeah,
that's always the thing that we've especially talked about on here, because I saw throughout the years people move away from the big 2 and start looking, at the indie publishers, and I heard it from my subscribers and regulars of like, yeah, I'm looking for good stories, and you'll find them in the indie industry. You'll find them through avenues like Kickstarter, and that's definitely where I think a lot of, especially older readers, are looking. It seems like the entry point is, Batman, Spider-Man, but then as they grow, they start to look for more, and that's where I think indie publishing has especially been very good to the older readership.
And that's definitely true. And then what's weird is that it's harder and harder for comic book shops to carry those indie books. Mm-hmm. They're just not like, you're going to sell. They're taking a risk on anything because they have to buy the book to sell the book. That you're in a store. So, you're taking a risk. You're basically bringing things into your shop that you have to know you can move in order for you to make back the money you spent, pre-ordering it. And you're going to sell a certain number of Batman every month. You're going to sell a certain number of Spider-Man every month. You don't know if anyone's going to pick up Cicada Samurai and say, I'll come back to this every month. And also, I'm new. Indie publishers are inconsistent sometimes. There aren't a lot of indies, outside of the really big ones, Image, et cetera, that you can always rely on to every month have a new book. So, it's hard to build a relationship with people like that. It's a little bit more challenging. So, I understand totally comic book shops have to kind of rely on capes and tights and the larger image, the larger indies. But, anytime someone is willing to take a risk on someone new and really, really like truly independent, yeah, I definitely want to do anything I can to help that out. And so it's my bad that I didn't really put a tier in for this. I just didn't see, I was like, who would want to sell my book in a store? I just didn't think I was there myself yet. You know what I mean?
Well, this was best case scenario for sure, right?
Yeah. Oh,
good.
Yeah. Yeah. It's definitely a good lesson to learn and a good problem to have. And now it's something I know for next time. I can always make that an option and people can ignore it. But, if they want it, it's there.
And as we always say, let your creators know, your comic shops know, your publishers know that you are interested in a book. Always pre-order. Let them know what that number is. And that includes Kickstarter. So this campaign is set to end on Friday, October 13th at 11:59 p.m. Eastern Time. So we're just a few weeks away if people want to get in on these first printings, right?
Yeah. And then, that's it. And then what I'm planning to do, because I do want to put these in stores later and I do want to, reprint them for comic cons and things like that. What the versions of these books that I do for this campaign, I will never print again.
Awesome.
So I'll, there'll be the number that are ordered for the Kickstarter. We'll probably order some more of those just for myself and then sell some of those. But outside of the Kickstarter and maybe 10 or 15% more than whatever is ordered through the Kickstarter, I'm never printing them in this format again with these covers in this order ever again. So whatever you get through the Kickstarter, or any Kickstarter I ever do, I firmly believe this because my goal is to put them in the stores. I don't want to sell you the book in the store that I already sold you on Kickstarter. So the thing on Kickstarter will always be different. It'll always be a collectible that is separate from what you will get down the road, in your local comic shop. And that gives them something exclusive to sell too, So I want to make sure everyone feels like they've got their version of this. So I'm never going to reprint it like this again. So if you want it, the first version of it that ever existed, you have 2 weeks to get it.
Yeah, get on this as soon as you can. Again, there will be links to everywhere you can find these artists and the campaign specifically on the description of today's show. If you follow us on Twitter, on Instagram, you'll see more of stories and links to CICADA Samurai for Kickstarter. And then in the future, as hopefully we get more of this story, and I know I'm looking forward to reading my copy, seeing the pages that you were talking about, and please let them know one more time where they can find you if they have any questions or if they want to continue the conversation.
The best place is on Instagram. Instagram at Thorny Comics on Instagram. That's the best place. I update that most frequently.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Jerry, for coming on and talking about CICADA Samurai. I've been Daniel, joined by Jerry, and Broke at Core. All will be well.